Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Trump administration's unveiled its new nuclear weapons strategy, which involves spending at least $1.2 trillion to upgrade the U.S. nuclear arsenal, including developing a new nuclear-armed sea-launched cruise missile. The Nuclear Posture Review calls for developing low-yield warheads, which critics say blur the lines between nuclear and non-nuclear weapons, meaning they're more likely to be used. It also reportedly seeks to expand the number of scenarios under which the U.S. might consider the use of nuclear weapons, including in response to a major cyber attack. Trump's nuclear policy has alarmed arms control experts around the globe and been openly criticized by Iran, Russia, and China. We'll have more on this after headlines. House Republicans are facing backlash after releasing a controversial memo that reports to show the FBI and Justice Department abused their authority by placing Trump campaign advisor Carter Page under surveillance in 2016 over his ties with Russia. On Saturday, President Trump tweeted the memo, quote, totally vindicates him. But the memo actually raises new questions about the actions of the Trump campaign. Supporters of Trump had claimed the FBI used a partisan research document, the Steele dossier, to obtain a surveillance warrant for Page. But the memo actually reveals the FBI's probe of the Trump campaign was triggered not by the Steele dossier, but by the actions of another Trump advisor, George Papadopoulos, who reportedly bragged to an Australian diplomat in May 2016 that the Russians had political dirt on Hillary Clinton. According to the New York Times, Papadopoulos had been told weeks earlier that Moscow had thousands of emails that would embarrass Clinton. Papadopoulos pleaded guilty last October to lying to federal agents. Tensions growing between the United States and Venezuela. During a five-nation trip to South America, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said the U.S. is considering imposing sanctions and possibly an oil embargo against the oil-rich state. Late last week, Tillerson suggested the U.S. would support the Venezuelan military toppling the elected government of Nicolas Maduro.
I think there will be a change. We want it to be a peaceful change. In the history of Venezuela and in fact the history in other Latin American, South American countries, oftentimes it's the military that handles that when things are so bad that the military leadership realizes they can't serve the citizens anymore, they will manage a peaceful transition.
The Venezuelan defense minister, Vladimir Padrillo, criticized Tillerson for hinting at a possible military coup in Venezuela.
When you invite the armed forces to overthrow a government, you are disrespecting an institution that uses its principles, its Republican morality, its historical traditions. We are deeply proud of being the heirs of our liberator.
The New York Times has revealed Israeli drones, helicopters, and jets have secretly carried out 100 airstrikes inside Egypt over the past 2 years, targeting militants in northern Sinai. The covert attacks were done with the approval of the Egyptian president, General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, despite decades of strained relations between the two nations that fought 3 wars against each other. New Pentagon data shows the number of U.S. airstrikes in Yemen increased 6-fold last year following the election of Donald Trump. U.S. drones, AC-130 gunships, and fighter bombers carried out 131 airstrikes in Yemen in 2017, up from 21 airstrikes a year earlier. Late last year, U.S. Central Command also confirmed U.S. troops had conducted multiple ground operations in Yemen in 2017. This all came as Yemen was facing a humanitarian crisis and the largest cholera outbreak on record. In South Carolina, 2 people died and 116 were injured when an Amtrak passenger train traveling on the wrong track slammed into a stationary freight train. Rail experts said the accident could have been prevented if technology known as positive train control had been installed on the tracks. The accident marks the 3rd high-profile fatal Amtrak train accident in the last 2 months, 2 in the last week. There's a major new development in the scandal around USA Gymnastics team doctor Larry Nassar, who's been accused by 265 women and girls of sexual abuse. According to the New York Times, at least 40 of the victims were abused after the FBI began its investigation of Dr. Nassar in July of 2015. While FBI was conducting probes in 3 cities, no effort was apparently made by USA Gymnastics officials to warn other potential victims of Nassar. Meanwhile, on Friday, chaos broke out inside the courtroom during a sentencing hearing for Dr. Nassar. Randall Margraves, a father of 3 daughters who were all molested by Nassar, attempted to lunge at the doctor in the courtroom.
I would ask you to, as part of this sentencing, to grant me 5 minutes in the locked room of this demon.
I have
Would you do that?
That is not how
Yes or
our... No, sir, I can't.
Would you give me 1 minute?
You know that I can't do that. That's not how our legal system works.
Randall Margraves then lunged at the doctor, was handcuffed and removed from the courtroom, but he was later released without charge. In news from Hollywood, Uma Thurman has accused Harvey Weinstein of sexually assaulting her in a London hotel room after they worked together in a 1994 hit film, Pulp Fiction. More than 70 women have now accused the former film producer of sexual misconduct, including rape. In an interview with the New York Times, Uma Thurman said, quote, "The complicated feeling I have about Harvey is how bad I feel about all the women that were attacked after I was. I'm one of the reasons that a young girl would walk into his room alone the way I did." In France, Oxford professor and renowned Islamic scholar Tariq Ramadan has been charged with rape after he was accused by 2 women of rape and sexual assault last year. Ramadan, who has been taken into custody, has denied the accusations. It's been another deadly weekend for migrants trying to reach the shores of Europe. On Saturday, the bodies of at least 20 African migrants were discovered off of Melilla, a Spanish enclave in northern Africa. Meanwhile, on Friday, 90 migrants are feared to have died when their boat capsized off the coast of Libya. Leonard Doyle is a spokesperson at the International Organization for Migration, the IOM.
It's an absolutely shocking tragedy that seems to have occurred off Libya, when we think as many as 90 Pakistani migrants trying to reach a better life ended up through the criminal act of smugglers drowning.
Meanwhile, in Italy, a suspected neo-Nazi shot 6 African migrants on Saturday in a series of drive-by shootings in the city of Macerata. The gunman has been identified as Luca Traini, an Italian man who has a neo-Nazi tattoo above his eye. Last year, he ran for office as a member of the far-right League Party, which has been projected to make major gains in next month's Italian election. And in Minneapolis, 17 people were arrested Sunday before the Super Bowl as they attempted to block a light rail line carrying Super Bowl ticket holders to the stadium. The activists, which included members of Black Lives Matter, said in a statement that they were, quote, using this moment to stand with athletes who've protested throughout the past 2 football seasons and calling attention to the murder of black people by police, unquote. We'll have more on the protests in Minneapolis later in the broadcast. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.